I do want to talk to you guys a little bit about why I use drip, because drip tape is not the only type of drip irrigation I use. I have drip irrigation throughout my entire garden, and I have a fairly big garden space to water. You know, I work a full-time job. I don't have time to come out here every night when I get off work and stand here for literally hours watering everything that I need to do. It's not physically, it would not be physically possible for me to do. You might be thinking like, why don't you just set sprinklers? Well, as you can see, it is too windy for sprinklers to work effectively. The air, or the water, is going up into the air, and out here in the spring and summer, it's immediately getting blown away by the wind before it ever reaches the plants where it needs to go. Drip irrigation is usually underneath a layer of mulch, but even if it weren't, it's dripping so slowly that it's going right down into the root system of the plant. It's dripping near the crown of the plant. So the plant is getting it right away. It's not blowing all over the place and running off and evaporating in the air when it's 105 degrees out. It's just dripping right where the plant needs it. And lastly, drip irrigation is going to cut down on your weeds, because here, at least, if it doesn't get watered, it's not going to grow. If you're watering with a sprinkler or just with an overhead water and you're just kind of splashing water around, you're watering weeds and weed seeds. Things here that do not get irrigated, they die. Unless you're Bermuda or a hackberry or a juniper, if you're not getting the supplemental water, because it does not, and I mean does not, rain here in the summer. In fact, we need rain really bad right now, and it's spring, and most places get tons of rain in the spring, but we are in dire need of it. So irrigation is really the only way that most plants can survive. And the weeds, but come, you know, June, July, if they're not getting water, they're just going to die, and they're not going to come back, and they're not going to reseed. Just as an FYI, it is a very windy day. It's been a very windy week here where we are, and just all across Texas in general. So I apologize for any wind noise that may make it hard to hear. I will do my absolute best during this video. I want to start off by showing you guys a few different pieces of drip irrigation supply. This is a supply line. It is a 1/2-inch poly supply line. It is what brings the water to the drip tape to fill it up. This is the drip tape that I use. It has emitters every 6 inches. These little guys are emitters. This drip tape lays flat when you put it on the ground, and then when it fills up with water, as you can see right there, it inflates, becomes round like this one, and the water weeps very gently over the sides of the tape from that emitter. It doesn't spray out, it just kind of bubbles up and falls over, and I will show y'all what it looks like when this is running here in just a second. Drip tape's main application is for row cropping or growing something in a straight row. And drip tape is good for that because you can make a much longer run than you can with other types of irrigation materials. It's meant to be stretched out for a pretty long distance and still have good pressure at the end of the line as well as at the front of the line. I use it for growing cut flowers like zinnias and celosia and things like that. I have a dedicated cut flower garden space in which I use this drip tape, and it is the only place that I do use drip tape. This is what a roll of drip tape looks like. It's from a company called Irritech. It's light drip line, so light duty drip line. And I get all of my drip tape from a company called Drip Depot, dripdepot.com. And all of the things that I'm going to use in this video and show you, I will have them linked in the description, the exact ones that I use. So if you just kind of want to like plug and play in your space, you will be able to do that if you just follow the links. However, I do just want to put a bit of a disclaimer on this video and tell you guys, you will want to check, if you're worried, with the local authorities or a plumber or somebody like that, a landscaper. If you're concerned about doing this at your home, get some advice from them. This is what works for me. I've never had a problem doing it this way, but everyone's water system and pressure is different. So you're going to want to just do some research on your own before you just dive into this. These are some drip lines that I laid yesterday, and as you guys can see, they come all along right here and all the way down to that end over there. Now they do stop and come from a different supply line about halfway down, and that is because I kind of want to grow a different variety on this tape than I do on that tape, so I don't really want to tie myself down to the same tape that is going to be running for the same amount of time all the way down this row. That will make more sense later when I talk about different kinds of varieties that you can plant along this tape, because sometimes when you're row cropping, you might only have 50 feet of a certain kind of cut flower and then need to start again with something else. And that something else might have different water needs than the thing that you just got done seeding. So I try to break it up halfway down this cut flower space just so that I can be a little bit more in control of the amount of water that is running to each particular row. Okay, let's install this line of drip and I will walk you guys through step by step how I do it. So this is where I want the next line of drip to run, is right down this row. So I just walked it out with it on the reel. You can buy a special reel for this drip tape if you use it really consistently and over just like hundreds and hundreds of feet. I don't have that necessity, so I just unroll it by hand. I'm going to connect it to the supply right here. I'll show you how I do that. And then I'm going to end it with a little ender so that the water doesn't blow out the back. And I will show y'all how I do that. First, let's connect it to the supply. This is a drip tool. It's a punch so that you can connect things to your supply line. So when I pull the trigger, this little guy comes in. I set it over the drip line like this. Pull the trigger, that little guy comes in and punches a hole. In that hole goes our connection, and therefore the water will leave our black supply line, like I showed y'all earlier, that 1/2-inch poly supply line, and it will hit our drip tape. This connector that I've chosen, which is what I'm going with this year, has a valve, right? So my drip tape is going to enter on this end. I'm going to screw it down with this little guy right here. It's a collar. It screws down and grabs the drip tape and keeps it in place. This is a barb that has a hole in it. It goes into the supply line, and this is a valve, so I can turn this row on or off as needed. If I have a row that's running right next to it that's a little bit higher water need than this one, I don't have to change my timer or have a new zone for that row. I can just turn that row off. So to place my drip tape on this connector, that collar that I showed y'all, wind it all the way back so that it's seated all the way back towards the valve. I'm going to slide my drip tape over it. This is the top of the drip tape, and remember, it lays flat like this. Look, it lays flat like this. So I want these to be lined up like that. I'm actually going to trim this little flap right here because that's going to make it so that my drip tape isn't seated all the way in on this connector. We don't want that. We want everything to be nice and tight and flush. Get rid of that. Slide this on. Push it in so that it's seated all the way in there. And then screw the collar down over it so that it's nice and tight and it's not going anywhere. I'm going to punch my hole just like this. It fits right over. Now I got a hole in my supply line. I'm going to fit this guy right into it. Just like that. As far as how to end off the drip tape, this is what I like to use. Once again, we have this collar here that screws down and this little loop just in case you need to tie it down with something. Before the flowers grow up around this drip tape, it has a habit of like humping up and like doing this on the ground. I don't really know what that's about, but it moves all over the place when it's filling with water, and then when it drains, and then when the sun hits it, I just think the plastic moves around and it constricts and relaxes and makes this drip tape all weird. And if I have seeds in the ground, I don't want my drip tape to go anywhere. So I have found that these enders with the little loop can allow me to, once I have these two connected, if I want to like tie this to this, which is much less likely to move, and I can stretch it taut and just kind of like have something to hold this drip tape in place. I really like that versus just like a regular ender with no loop on the back. So that's why I use these. And just like with that other connector, we're gonna wind the collar all the way back. Open this guy up, slide him on all the way. And then I tighten that collar down, and our drip tape's in place. Let me walk you guys through the drip system, just start to finish. Now that I've shown you how to hook up one piece of drip tape to the supply line, everything else should be fairly easy, but I need to show you what the setup at the Spigot looks like, just in case you want to hook this up to your hose bib. This is the hose bib. Well, this is the hose bib. This is where the water is coming from. This is the water supply. I do have a 4-way splitter on here. That's not necessary, but if you are going to have an entire spigot dedicated to the timer, it can be kind of a pain because, like, let's say you want to also use this spigot as a hose, just like a watering hose like I do. So I have all those plants over there that need watering, and I don't want to have to take this guy on and off of this in order to do that. Something that y'all want to be cautious of is that the majority of this timer is made out of plastic, and this housing is plastic, and so are these pieces up here. And the more that we move it about, the more likely it is to crack up here. This thing's out in the sun and the elements all summer. So I just tend to be very careful about unnecessary movement of this timer. I just want it to be turned on and left alone other than this dial. I don't want to be taking it on and off. So that's why I have a splitter, so that I can hook up my hose to a hose reel on the other side of this telephone pole. So this is a single zone timer. It's by Orbit. It's all that I need over here, and it has lots of options, including manual, so that if I come home on a day that was very hot and windy and things are looking a little sad, I can just manually turn it on for like 10-20 minutes, and it won't disrupt the timing that I have programmed into this timer. It's just like a little supplement. So coming off of here, I do have just like a little extra piece. This came with this splitter, and I put it on there just so that it would have the ability to kind of droop down where the supply is leaving the spigot, and just be kind of like protected. So that's an extra piece that I have on there. This is a quick connect just in case I want to take this whole thing away from this. This little collar just lifts away, and you would be able to just kind of like lay this down on the ground if you need to. This little system is a few things in one. It's a backflow preventer, a pressure reducer, and then a connection for the poly. Drip tape can only withstand about 1 bar of pressure. So this pressure reducer is necessary because the pressure of water that's going to be coming off this spigot, you're going to blow out your lines for drip tape. It can't tolerate that much pressure. So this necks the water pressure down before it hits this supply line, so that we're not out there in the garden just with lines blown out everywhere, because it can't handle the kind of pressure that's coming out of the spigot. So that's what these pieces are. My poly screws right into this because obviously this is just a piece of plastic. It can't meet this, right? There's nothing for it to screw onto. So this poly is shoved up in there, and this collar is wound down around the poly. So the water is leaving here. When the timer goes off, it's coming through here. Now we're only at 10 PSI. We come through here. And I'm gonna be burying this a few inches deep so that it doesn't get run over by the lawnmower or anything. Follow it, follow it, follow it, follow it. And this is where it meets the drip line that we just laid. It comes up and connects right there. I just dug a little hole and then brought it up with an elbow and a T. And then this is my supply line. It runs all along the perimeter of this cut flower garden so that I can tap into it wherever I need. And then, as I showed you guys, the drip tape hooks in there and takes off down the row. I don't know if my mic is picking it up, but y'all can hear that hissing sound. That is water leaving the line, and that's air leaving the line, and that is totally normal. It'll stop once everything gets up to the correct pressure. As you can see, the water comes up out of this emitter and just weeps down onto the ground below. It's very, very, very gentle dripping. So when I get ready to seed this here in about a week or two, this isn't going to wash away my seed, and I can use the timer to choose exactly how much water the seeds will get. So when I first plant seedlings, when I first put seeds in the ground, like my zinnias, they are going to need more consistent, shorter times in order to stay moist so they can germinate. When they are full grown, however, I'll only have to run it like once a day in the very, very early morning before the sun comes up. But that's the great thing about the timer is I can choose, hey, it needs 15 minutes every 6 hours, or it needs 40 minutes every 24 hours. Whatever it is, it's super, super easy to choose how much water you're going to be providing to your plants with this drip tape. Another thing that you can do to keep your drip tape from humping up and moving around all over the place before your plants get good and established, because once the plants are grown, they're going to hold this drip tape in place better than anything that you could possibly put next to it. You know, when you have like 4-foot zinnias every 6 inches, this drip tape's going nowhere. But until your plants get that big, you could just make like little staples like this, add a slick wire, and just kind of hold them down in place. Or you can buy landscape staples and do the same thing. I hope I was able to explain that fairly well. If you have any questions whatsoever about this setup that I just showed you, or about the products or anything, please feel free to comment or find me on TikTok, whatever. I'm happy to answer questions because I wish I had just had someone to talk to when I had first started doing drip irrigation that could just really explain it in a very detailed, like non-jargon way, which is what most of the videos that I found online use are like all this jargon that I don't understand about irrigation. So I hope that was helpful. Next video, I'll show you guys how I seed this area and how I set up my timer to water the seeds so that they come up properly. And you know, now cut flower season is upon us, so very exciting. I'll see you all in the next one.